and that requires extraordinarily hard efforts from China. Support is being given to encourage peaking pioneers from localities, sectors, and companies. We will strictly control coal-fired power generation projects. We will strictly limit the increase in coal consumption over the 14th five-year plan period and phase it down in the 15th five-year plan period. China will host COP15 of the Convention on Biological Diversity and support COP26 of the UNFCCC in achieving positive outcomes. China will promote joint efforts to build a green Belt and Road to benefit the people of all countries. I am confident that as long as we unite in our purposes and efforts, we will rise above the global climate and environment challenges and leave a clean and beautiful world to future generations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I now call upon the Prime Minister of the Republic of India, His Excellency Narendra Modi.
Your Excellency, President Biden, colleagues, my fellow citizens of this planet, Namaskar. I would like to thank President Biden for taking this initiative. Humanity is battling a global pandemic right now. And this event is a timely reminder that the grave threat of climate change had not disappeared. In fact, climate change is a lived reality for millions around the world. Their lives and livelihoods are already facing its adverse consequences. Friends, for humanity to combat climate change, concrete action is needed. We need such action at a high speed, on a large scale, and with a global scope. We in India are doing our part. Our ambitious renewable energy target of 450 gigawatts by 2030 shows our commitment. Despite our development challenges, we have taken many bold steps on clean energy, energy efficiency, afforestation, and biodiversity. That is why we are among the few countries whose NDCs are 2 degrees Celsius compatible. We have also encouraged global initiatives like International Solar Alliance, LEAD IT, and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Friends, as a climate responsible developing country, India welcomes partners to create templates of sustainable development in India. This can also help other developing countries who need affordable access to green finance and clean technologies. That is why President Biden and I are launching the India-US Climate and Clean Energy Agenda 2030 Partnership. Together, we will help mobilize investments, demonstrate clean technologies, and enable green collaborations. Friends, today, as we discuss global climate action, I want to leave one thought with you. India's per capita carbon footprint is 60% lower than the global average. It is because of our lifestyle is still rooted in sustainable traditional practices. So today, I want to emphasize the importance of lifestyle change in climate action. Sustainable lifestyles and guiding philosophy of back to basic must be an important pillar of our economic strategy for the post-COVID era. Friends, I recall the words of the great Indian monk, Swami Vivekananda. He called on us to arise, awake, and stop not until the goal is reached. Let us make this decade of action against climate change. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. And now, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the Right Honourable Boris Johnson. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Tony, and Your Excellencies, colleagues, friends. I'd like to begin by thanking President Biden very much for bringing us all together in the way that he has, and for setting out the problem in the eloquent way that he did at the beginning, and of course for returning the United States to the front rank of the fight against climate change. And I'm really thrilled by the game-changing announcement that Joe Biden has just made. And I'm very proud that the UK is doing the same. We were the first country to pass legislation for net zero. We have the biggest offshore wind capacity still, I think, of any country in the world, the Saudi Arabia of wind, as I never tire of saying. We're halfway to net zero. We have carbon emissions lower than at any point since the 19th century. We're ending support for fossil fuels overseas and doubling our international climate finance. And we're actually speeding up because we see the obligation, as colleagues have just pointed out, for developed countries to do more. We're legislating to deliver 78% of the reductions needed to reach that goal by 2035. And as host of COP26, we want to see similar ambitions around the world. And we're working with everybody, from the smallest nations to the biggest emitters, to secure commitments that will keep change to within 1.5 degrees. And I think we can do it. And to do it, we need the scientists and all of our countries to work together to produce the technological solutions that humanity is going to need, whether it's carbon capture and storage, or solving the problems of cheap hydrogen delivery, or getting to jet zero flying, getting to net zero flying, making sure that we can really roll out EVs properly, making sure that our homes stop emitting such prodigious quantities of CO2, moving to sustainable domestic living. We can do this together across the world. And it's going to mean the richest nations coming together and exceeding the $100 billion commitment that they already made in 2009. I stress how important that is. Plus, and I think what President Xi had to say about the harmony with nature was absolutely vital. If we're going to tackle climate change sustainably, we have to deal with the disaster of habitat loss and species loss across our planet. And we want to see more examples of governments and private industry working hand in hand, as with the newly launched LEAF Coalition to reduce deforestation and the multi-trillion-dollar Glasgow Financial Alliance for net zero. And to do these things, we've got to be constantly original and optimistic about new technology and new solutions, whether that's super resistant crops that are super resistant to drought, or more accurate weather forecasts like those we hope to see from the UK's new Met Office, £1.2 billion supercomputer that we're investing in. I'm not saying any of this is going to be easy, and there is obviously going to be a political challenge. And I think it's very important to go back to the original words of President Biden, because it's vital for all of us to show that this is not all about some expensive, politically correct green act of bunny hugging, or however you want to put it. I'm not wrong with bunny hugging, but you know what I'm driving at, friends and colleagues. This is about growth and jobs, and I think the president was absolutely right to stress that. And I want to leave you with the thought that we can build back better from this pandemic by building back greener. And don't forget that the UK has been able to cut our own CO2 emissions by about 42% on 1990 levels, and we've seen our economy grow by 73%. You can do both at once. Cake, have, eat is my message to you. So let's work together on this. Let's go to Kunming in October and then Glasgow in November, armed with ambitious targets and the plans required to meet them. And let's use this extraordinary moment and the incredible technology that we're working on to make this decade the moment of decisive change in the fight against climate change, and let's do it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. And now the Prime Minister of Japan, His Excellency Yoshihide Suga. Mr. Prime Minister.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Joe, I am pleased to meet with you again. I would like to reiterate my deepest gratitude for your hospitality at the White House just a week ago. I would also like to take this opportunity to commend your leadership for holding this important summit. Extreme weather events such as torrential rains, forest fires, and heavy snowfalls are witnessed worldwide in recent years, and climate change is said to be a major cause of such events. Responding to climate change and progressing decarbonization is hence an imminent challenge which the whole of humankind should aim to solve. At the same time, our response to climate change is no longer a constraint on our economy. Rather, it will be the driving force of the long-term dynamic growth of not only Japan, but also the whole world. With this vision in mind, in the fall of last year, I immediately after assuming my office as Prime Minister, I declared that Japan will aim for net zero by 2050. We will take a big step toward the resolution of this global issue. Japan aims to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 46% in the fiscal year 2030 compared to the fiscal year 2013 as an ambitious target which is aligned with the long-term goal of net zero by 2050. Furthermore, Japan will continue strenuous efforts in its challenge to meet the lofty goal of cutting its emission by 50%. Such a goal of 46% in reductions would mean that Japan will raise our current target by more than 70%, and it will certainly not be an easy task. However, by defining a top-level ambitious target appropriate for the next growth strategy of the nation which underpins global manufacturing, Japan is ready to demonstrate its leadership for worldwide decarbonization. From now on, we will accelerate our deliberations for establishing concrete measures toward achieving the target. Japan, in order to create a virtuous cycle of the economy and the environment and to grow strongly towards our ambitious goal for 2030, will work to maximize the utilization of decarbonized power sources such as renewable energy and take incentive measures sufficient for inducing investment by companies. The national and subnational governments of Japan will work together to aim for achieving decarbonization in more than 100 subnational regions across the country by 2030. Japan will also work for the realization of innovation that will enhance production and secure sustainability in food, agriculture, and the forestry sectors. Furthermore, Japan will advance the transition to a circular economy, thereby creating new industries and employment. Japan will continue its unceasing efforts toward 2030 and 2050.
Global decarbonization is what cannot be achieved by the efforts of one country alone. It is a challenge that requires the whole international community to be united as one. We can create global waves for climate change measures with ambitious targets presented and implemented by countries attending the summit today who are responsible for around 80% of global emissions, thereby overwhelming the whole world with our waves. Joe, on the occasion of my recent visit to the United States last week, I had the pleasure to confirm with you our commitment to lead the world global decarbonization efforts. In more concrete terms, Joe and I launched Japan-US Climate Partnership on Ambition, Decarbonization, and Clean Energy. Based on this partnership, Japan and the United States will work to promote worldwide decarbonization and continue cooperation in each area of the implementation of the Paris Agreement, clean energy technologies and innovation, and accelerating transition of developing countries, including Indo-Pacific countries, to a decarbonized society. In parallel to such bilateral efforts, Japan has provided public and private climate finance amounting to approximately 1.3 trillion Japanese yen, which is equivalent to approximately $11.8 billion. We announced that we will make contributions of up to $3 billion to the Green Climate Fund. We will support the global transition to decarbonization by maximizing the use of Japan's leading technologies in areas such as energy efficiency, hydrogen, and CCS, carbon capture and storage. In the area of adaptation, Japan will promote international cooperation to address the impacts hitting vulnerable states in the world. No other time than now does international society require further solidarity for the realization of a decarbonized society. Japan, as a nation that puts utmost importance on multilateral approaches, is determined to take the lead in solving the challenge of climate change for the whole of humankind by cooperating with each country and international organizations for the coming months leading up to COP26 and beyond. Thank you for your attention.
Pleasure to call upon the Prime Minister of Canada, the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau. Mr. Prime Minister.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Bonjour à tous. I want to begin by thanking President Biden for hosting this summit. Mr. President, thank you for your leadership on addressing the climate crisis and on other shared priorities, from the fight against COVID-19 to building a strong middle class. I'm encouraged to see so many countries coming together today to fight climate change. It's the only way to overcome the challenges people face in every part of our world. That's why it's also vital that we all work together to strengthen respect for international law, reaffirm our collective commitment to human rights, and stand up for people who face persecution abroad. Our collective success depends on finding a better path, not only to a more sustainable future, but to shared peace and prosperity for everyone. Notre priorité continue d'être notre lutte.
Our priority continues to be combating COVID-19. We rely on science to save lives and develop vaccines, but we must also listen to climate science, which tells us that we are facing an existential threat.
We must take action now because there's no vaccine against a polluted planet. When Canadians elected us 5 years ago, our emissions were projected to keep rising through 2030. But with hard work and a solid plan, Canada is now on track to blow past our old target of 30% reduction below 2005 levels. Last December, we strengthened our climate plan to reduce more emissions, including with a world-leading price on pollution. This week, we made additional investments in the budget, and today, Canada is in a position to raise our climate ambition once again. Our new climate target for 2030 is to reduce our 2005 emission levels by 40 to 45%. And we will continually strengthen our plan and take even more actions on our journey to net zero by 2050. Seules les politiques climatiques sérieuses donnent des résultats.
Only bold climate policies lead to bold results. For example, you can no longer pollute in Canada for free. In 2030, our carbon price will reach $170 per ton.
$170 a ton. Climate ambition and economic ambition go together. That's why we're investing in public transit, clean energy, retrofitting homes, and decarbonizing industry like steel, cement, and aluminum to secure our clean industrial advantage. We're also banning harmful single-use plastics, protecting 30% of our oceans and land, and planting 2 billion trees. And we will make it law to respect our new 2030 target and achieve net zero emissions by 2050. That's our local story. And it can be part of a global success story too. In Canada, we've worked hard to get to over 80% emissions-free electricity, and we're not going to stop until we get to 100%. If major economies in the room were to follow Canada's lead and adopt a rising price on pollution and commit to phase out coal plants, we would accelerate our global path for a safe, prosperous net zero future. Le Canada est un pays qui produit et exporte de l'énergie.
Canada is a country that produces and exports energy. And so I understand that this will not be easy. We are all facing different realities, but if all governments and Indigenous peoples and different sectors can all come together and work together, then we should be able to find solutions and create real change. And that is why we're here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. I now call upon the Prime Minister of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, Her Excellency Sheikh Hasina. Madam Prime Minister.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Honorable President Joe Biden, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Excellencies, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I thank President Biden for convening the summit and inviting me to speak to this august gathering. Bangladesh deeply appreciates the United States' return to the Paris Climate Agreement and is keen to engage with the international community. Excellencies, despite being a climate vulnerable country with resource constraints, Bangladesh has emerged as a global leader on adaptation and mitigation. Every year, we are spending on an average $5 billion US, about 2.5% of our GDP, on climate adaptation and resilience building measures. The 1.1 million forcefully displaced Rohingyas from Myanmar, whom we have sheltered, worsened our vulnerability. Bangladesh is pursuing a low-carbon development path to raise our national determined contribution, NDC, and adaptation ambition. We have included new sectors in addition to the existing energy, industry, and transport sectors in the mitigation process. We are planning to submit a quantified, ambitious NDC by June 2021. Excellencies, Bangladesh is observing Mujib Year, marking the birth centenary of the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. We are planting 30 million saplings nationwide and adopted Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan to achieve low-carbon economic growth. As the chair of the Climate Vulnerable Forum and B20, Bangladesh's key focus is to uphold the interest of the climate vulnerable countries. We are hosting the South Asian Regional Office of the Global Center on Adaptation, which is promoting locally led adaptation solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us that global crisis can only be addressed through a strong collective response. As such, as a responsible member state of the COP and as the chair of CBA, I would like to make few suggestions. Number one, immediate and ambitious action plan by developed countries to reduce their carbon emissions to keep the global temperature rise at 1.5 degrees Celsius. The developing nations should also focus on mitigation measures. Number two, ensuring the annual target of $100 billion US, which should be balanced 50-50 between adaptation and mitigation with special attention to the vulnerable countries while pursuing loss and damage. Number three, major economies, international financial institutions, and private sectors should come forward for concessional climate financing as well as innovation. And number four, focus is needed on green economy and carbon neutral technologies with provision to technology transfer among nations. I thank you all.
Thank you very much, Madam Prime Minister. It's now a pleasure to call upon the Chancellor of the Federal Republic of Germany, Her Excellency Angela Merkel. Madam Chancellor.
Ja, sehr geehrter Herr Präsident, lieber Joe Biden.
Mr. President, dear Joe Biden, dear colleagues, I'm delighted to see that the United States is back to work together with us in climate politics, because there can be no doubt about the world needing your contribution if we really want to fulfill our ambitious goals. And the national contribution of the United States for 2030 is a clear illustration of your ambitions. That is a very clear and important message to the international community. Thank you for this, and thank you for organizing this summit. This is a Herculean task, because this is nothing short of a complete transformation, a complete change of the way we do business, the way we work. And Germany, as you know, has already reduced its emissions by 40 compared to 2019 and the 1990, and the European Union will be climate neutral by 2050, and we want to at least have 55% less emissions by 2030 compared to 1990. At the beginning of this week, the EU adopted an agreement that sets this target as a binding one into law, and we as Germany will obviously give our contribution. We have actually described a policy that sets out a pathway towards climate neutrality. We think that CO2 pricing is the right way forward. That is why we have introduced a national emissions trading for transport and heating, and thus so far for sectors that have not been covered by EU emissions trading. Coal has been for us a very important resource, but by the latest, and I heard Antonio Guterres on that, by the very latest, by 2038, we will phase out coal electrification, and we will invest further into renewables. Already last year, we have produced electricity, 46% of our electricity from renewables, and we want to increase that. The necessary economic recovery after the pandemic is something that we also want to use for innovation, for technology. So we invest in renewables instead of in coal, and we also see to it that the loss of biodiversity all over the world is stopped. We think that we need to place 30% of the global land and marine surface under protection. We need primarily solidarity with the developing countries. As industrialized countries, we have committed ourselves to mobilize by 2020 an annual amount of $100 billion, and this is to be followed up by an extension until at the very least 2025. Germany has doubled its financing by 2020 to 4 billion euros per year, and we're going to continue to contribute our fair share to this. With all of these measures, we, I think, underline very clearly that we are interested in a success of COP26 in Glasgow this year, and obviously also COP15 in Kunming, where we're talking about preserving biodiversity. And in line with its tradition, Germany is going to host, together with the United Kingdom, the 12th Petersburg Climate Dialogue this year, and we're going to prepare Glasgow. Thus, we are an active member, and we're very much looking forward to cooperating with all of you.
Fixer un mandat plus fort à nos banques publiques pour mettre en œuvre la neutralité carbone. Enfin, si nous voulons réussir, et ce sera mon mot.
And if we want to succeed, and this will be my final word about the climate change, we must speed up the protection of biodiversity. Indeed, the fight is the same. It's the fight for the planet. In this respect, the accelerator of the Green Wall shows that Africa contributes to the fight against the causes and effects of climate change while boosting food security and job opportunities for its young people. All of these agendas are connected. It is up to us to take action. Thank you again, Joe. It's up to us to take action for our generations and the generations to come. Thank you.
They may be getting Macron because that was a tape of Macron.
Mr. President, colleagues, ladies, gentlemen, our discussion today demonstrates how deeply we all share the concern with regard to global climate change, and how much we're all interested in redoubling the international effort to address this issue. Whether this effort proves successful will largely determine the future of our planet, the development prospects of each country, as well as the well-being and quality of life of our citizens. We believe there is a solid legal framework for international collaboration in controlling and reducing greenhouse gas emissions, namely the universal agreements reached under the UN auspices. I'd like to stress that Russia treats its international commitments with the utmost responsibility in this sphere, and I refer in particular to the implementation of the UNFCCC, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement. We take active effort in Russia to build modern legislation that allows both controlling carbon emissions and creating incentives for their reduction. Yesterday, I presented my annual address to the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation, and among our social and economic priorities, I listed the task of significantly reducing the net accumulated emissions in our country by 2050. I'm confident that despite Russia's size, its geography, climate, and economic structure, this task is achievable. We shouldn't forget, as colleagues have already pointed out throughout this summit, recollecting the 90s, as compared to the 1990 level, Russia has reduced its greenhouse gas emissions to a greater extent than many other countries. Our emissions have halved, dropping from 3.1 billion tons to 1.6 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. This has become possible because of a fundamental restructuring of our industry and energy that has been underway for the last 2 decades. As a result, as of now, 45% of our energy mix is accounted for by low-emission energy sources, including nuclear generation. And as is well known, the greenhouse gas emissions from nuclear power plants stand at almost zero throughout all of the life cycle of nuclear power plants. We intend to further improve our capacities for using associated petroleum gas and carry out a large-scale campaign for environmental modernization and greater energy efficiency across all economic sectors to ensure carbon capture, storage, and use from all sources. We're also building an infrastructure for producing hydrogen to be used both as a fuel and an energy source. I'd like to take note in that regard that Russia has launched a pilot project in Sakhalin region for creating a carbon pricing system and a mechanism for carbon trading. This project will allow this Russian region to become carbon neutral as soon as by 2025. It is no secret that the conditions that facilitated global warming and associated problems go way back. But what kind of comprehensive solutions to these issues can we see today? First, carbon dioxide can stay in the atmosphere for hundreds of years. So it's not enough to tackle the issue of new emissions. It is also important to take up the task of absorbing the CO2 that has accumulated in the atmosphere. Let me say that without exaggeration, Russia makes a gigantic contribution to absorbing global emissions, both ours and from elsewhere, owing to the great absorption capacities of our ecosystems that are estimated at around 2.5 billion tons of CO2 equivalent per annum. Second, we need to take into account each and every factor contributing to global warming. To cite an example, methane accounts for 20% of all anthropogenic emissions, and the greenhouse effect of a single ton of methane is 25 to 28 times stronger than that of a ton of CO2. So supposing we can halve methane emissions in the next 3 decades, experts project global temperatures to decrease by 2050 by 0.18 degrees centigrade, which incidentally makes up to 45% of the difference between the current temperatures and the objectives under the Paris Agreement. In this regard, it would be imperative to foster a broad and efficient international cooperation in calculating and monitoring all harmful emissions into the atmosphere. We invite all those interested countries to join collaborative scientific research, to jointly invest in climate projects that can make a difference in real life, and to actively pursue new low-carbon technologies for mitigation and adaptation. Third, I'm convinced that the fight for preserving our climate should certainly unite the efforts of the international community as a whole. Russia is willing to propose a whole range of joint projects and to consider potential benefits even for foreign companies that would like to invest in clean technologies, including in our countries. And lastly, global development should not only be good